Welcome to the Energy in Motion podcast, exploring what makes us move, what makes us thrive, what makes us happy, what keeps us alive. I'm Suzy Rowland, a mother, writer, poet and founder of the Happy in School project. As humans, we are emotional beings, literally energy in motion, which each of us express uniquely. Our energies influence everything in our lives. Join me in conversation with an eclectic range of guests using their energies to powerful effect. Tune in for the first series of Energy in Motion podcast. You'll find the Energy in Motion podcast on your favourite digital download channels. I can't wait for you to tune in and relax and enjoy the sound of Energy in Motion. Danielle Bridge, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever it is.
Hello. Nice to be here.
Welcome to the Energy in Motion podcast. I am so excited about this conversation. It's a big conversation and there's a lot to cover. And but we're going to keep it as light as possible and informative, and hopefully help people understand a bit more and navigate about, what your charity Black Minds Matter offers, and just give them things to think about if they are thinking of seeking some help or support. So Energy in Motion, it's all about your emotions basically, and I'm really excited about this conversation and the potential benefits of it. So how are you feeling right now and what's your intention?
Energy wise, I haven't really got much at the moment. I'm just coming out of a weekend of a migraine, which wasn't fun. And when I say a weekend, like it was like 3 days. So often takes me a while to get back into the swing of things. But that said, from a work point of view, I'm super excited. So my energy is quite high. But I would be lying if I said I wasn't tired. And I think doing this work as well is also quite tiring. It takes a lot of energy. It's very extractive. So I work really hard to try and find that balance. So today, mixed, but yeah, future-wise, I'm excited.
Awesome. The phrase "therapist, heal thyself" sprang into my mind when you said that, because it is very extractive, and you are, all those in the healing space are givers.
Yes.
But you realize that you are giving and giving and depleting yourself. So it's really, really important to replete yourself,
Right. Yes.
replenish yourself. So I'm sorry to hear you had a migraine, and I think that's partly the thinking that you do.
Yeah, it is. And, to be fair, I'm a woman. So, there are certain things that come along with being a woman that kind of contribute to that, I guess. But I know myself very well. So to your point, know thyself. I know myself very well. It's taken me a long time to understand what it is that I need when I need it and how to go about replenishing myself.
Yeah.
And I'm very good at it, Suzy. I must admit it's taken me a while, a lifetime, some would say, but I've got there. So I finally now realize what I need when I need it. And I make proactive steps to get what I need in my life when I need it.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. So in terms of mental health, it's become the story since COVID. We've never ever heard in my lifetime quite so much about mental health and mental health impacts. So what has your charity seen, Black Minds Matter, since that period? Have you
Yeah,
seen more
great
demand?
question. Really good question. So Black Lives Matter UK was born out of that reckoning, I guess, around mental health at the start of the pandemic when George Floyd was murdered, and everyone was talking about mental health as if had suddenly just arrived, right? And I've been working in and around mental health for a long time. Did MHFA training as an instructor in 2017, I think it was, back into 2017, yeah, beginning of 2018. And so talking about mental health was only ever spoken about in spaces that occupied, health and social care, for example, or NHS or public sector. So it's been around since we've been around. Mental health has been a part of our journey. I think we only recently found the language to talk about it from an all person point of view, rather than those people that worked in and around health and social care. So we were certainly born from that, when George Floyd was murdered, and a lot of people were understanding how their feelings and emotions were affecting their life, and then mental health kind of came out with a bang. And it hasn't yet depleted. I am looking forward to the time when it does deplete, because I think by putting it out where it is now, we are almost there's a commodification of mental health, which is something that I find really, really disturbing, actually. So much so that we're talking about it. There are lots and lots of solution focus. There's lots of people talking about mental health and how you should do X, Y, and Z, or A, B, and C. And if you bought B and C, then maybe you're mental health. So has been a commodification of it, which I find quite disturbing. But needless to say, I think with the influx of the internet and social media specifically, we're now talking about it all because we have access to an awful lot more information. So yeah, to your point, I think that it's the big thing now, but it's always been the big thing. We're just talking about it more now.
Yeah, yeah. When you mentioned commodification, I'm reminded of a conversation I had with a colleague recently about how mental health or mental ill health, more precisely, is thriving in a capitalist society.
Mm,
We've set up the problem, and really set it up the problem. People even misunderstand what depression is
yeah,
currently, or anxiety is. And if you understand what clinical depression is, it can be, a life-threatening condition.
yeah. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
Therein lies the issue because depression is not you feel sad in one day. Anxiety is not that you are nervous. And I think actually even the removal of some of that language, I'm sad today, has been replaced by I'm depressed or I'm really anxious. Well, actually, you're nervous. And nerves and sadness are absolutely important parts of our human condition. Those range of emotions that we have as part of the response to everyday life challenges and happiness. So all of the emotions have now been removed and replaced with very, very difficult language, which creates a certain kind of hysteria around it sometimes. And I remember doing some talks and saying to people, I mean, I sing in a band, and when I go out and I'm just about to sing in my band, I'm nervous. And
Mm.
it's normal and appropriate to be nervous because I'm about to sing in front of 120 people. If I wasn't nervous, I'd think it was a bit weird. But I'm not anxious about it. So the language and the removal of everyday language around our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and emotions have been replaced by something which creates a sense of urgency and a sense of crisis, where in fact there isn't. And you mentioned a bit earlier on about mental health and mental ill health or mental illness being very, very different. Mental illness can be so debilitating and life-threatening that I think that gets lost as a result of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, but I think partly that's sort of the society that we're living in. It's setting up those problems, um, and making them sort of everyone's depressed, everyone's anxious, and everyone isn't depressed and everyone isn't
That's
anxious.
right.
It's just understanding the nuance. But in some ways, as you say, if we're in a capitalist society and there are solutions and products we can market for those ailments, we can understand why that sort of fuzziness about the terms it suits some people and some industries,
Absolutely.
but that's quite a concern, and it does cause a lot of conflict, because I work with schools and we do have a bit of an epidemic following the pandemic, about school non-attendance and school
Mm,
avoidance or school anxiety. And there's many different terms, EBSA, emotional based school avoidance, there's a whole list of different terms, quite exactly to your point, because people don't know what to call it. And actually some young people may feel anxious because they're being bullied, legitimately. Some may feel anxious because there are issues at home and they don't want to leave the house and they've got, attachment issues, or their grandmother's ill, or so it's so complicated. But I think, in the current discourse is to oversimplify things and make it kind of, you've got this thing, there's that thing for you, you can buy that
mm,
off the shelf, you can speak to that person, you can have this particular therapy. And I'm really looking forward to a time when we are able to have conversations that are a bit more nuanced about what it means to live in our fast-paced digital world, because that's also part of it, isn't it? This ability, we're always on.
yeah.
How on earth do we switch off and relax? So tell us a little bit more about your journey, the logistics of setting up a charity, and how that worked for you, and how you alighted upon, getting it set up. You're kind of like the UK's primary charitable organisation for Black mental health, and
Wow.
growing, yeah, but growing in terms of your reach and your offer, and certainly there's huge demand. So, how did that all work for you, and how did you find the process?
Great question. So, first of all, just to make it really, really clear, I wasn't the founder of Black Minds Matter UK. I joined the team in 2022 as a trustee and joined as the interim chief executive in 2023. And this was because in the very beginning of the inception of Black Minds Matter UK, it was a fund, it was a crowd fund, which raised about £1.4 million from supporters and individuals and organisations that were around when Black Squares were around and Black Lives Matter. Um,
Yes.
and that's how it kind of came to be in this massive viral campaign, which was phenomenal to watch. I joined the team as an operational interim chief executive, because the founders at the time had got the charity number and then moved on from the founding and the original crowd fund. So I was brought on to take it from that into a sustainable charity, and it's been really hard. It's been really hard because the black squares that signified Black Lives Matter and the mental health conversations have all dwindled, right? When last did you see a black square? When last did we talk about Black Lives Matter? When last did we have those really important conversations around mental health and the need to have representation in mental health services for Black people specifically? Now, what we are seeing now is the complete antithesis of that, the complete opposite of it. It's now EDI, we've got Trumpisms, all of this kind of stuff, that the flags and all of these things that tell people that the original quest of BMM UK isn't really cared about anymore, and overtly, being told actually no, we don't like that anymore. So it's been tough, and it's been tough because the landscape has changed. And that means that we've had to do a massive pivot with Black Minds Matter UK in terms of not relying wholeheartedly on all of the money that came in the very beginning, trying to create sustainability where we are here for generations to come. And that's a challenge that I find really, really hard. But also I'm trying my best to rise up to it.
Yes, I mean you're right. It was a huge pivotal moment, and I remember seeing about Black Minds Matter on social media and think,
Mm,
oh, I never knew they existed, and I made a donation. And I was very excited, and it did feel like finally, our mental health as Black and Brown people was recognised, and the traumas we felt vicariously through all the other the deaths that we'd seen, and then of
mm,
list, and it was very painful, and it is this whole concept of the collective grief, and so it did feel quite through that sadness quite an optimistic
yeah.
time. And as you say, in those few short years, it's changed so dramatically that we've now got to a point when, I'm driving up to a school and there's flags outside the school, and they're sort of Union flags or St George's flags, and I'm thinking, am I going to be welcome?
Mm, mhm.
So yes, it has travelled some way, and that sort of leads me neatly into the next question: is what is your feeling that so much of our mental health as people of the diaspora really stems from our past history as well as the current experiences we're having in our daily lives?
Mm. So I can only kind of speak from my own personal experience, right? I grew up in a very, very white area. I was one of three black kids at school. Everybody else was white. Um, and there was me and my brother, or two of them. There was another guy, Shola, African brother, who was at school. And we knew that we were of a minority and of a serious minority at the time, but I don't really remember it being traumatic, if that makes any sense. I remember, and I know that trauma is obviously very, very, very personal. What affects people might not affect me, and vice versa. I remember being different, and I remember it being really challenging at times, but I don't remember dwelling on it or thinking too much about it. I was too involved in my own life, as you are when you're a kid, quite self-centered, quite kind of focused on what it is that I had to do. And I left home quite young. I remember just getting on with my life, and there were difficult things that happened in my life, that were about my difference, I guess, my being a black girl in a very, very white area, and people saying nasty things and horrible things. And then I got on with it. I just lived my life. And so it's been interesting to me that as a grown up and with the the implementation of the internet and social media, now I know that that lived experience was felt by an awful lot of other people, and that's where my anger then peaked. So my anger and my sense of injustice and discrimination came quite late in my life, and it actually came quite late because I either chose to subconsciously or consciously to ignore it and get on with my very selfish life, and deal with difficult things that people said in a very isolated fashion. And when I say isolated, I'd cuss people. Like, who are you talking to? Blah, 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 blah. But it wasn't ever a thing that I then went on the internet and talked about or highlighted and lived through. I think now that the way we live our lives, just in the way in which it is, we are constantly aware of all of it, every single bit of it, all of the time. And I find that really hard because now I understand and realize that we are part of a system that is designed this way. And we are part of a legacy where our people have been disadvantaged and discriminated against year on year on purpose. And now I understand and I'm aware of all of this. And I remember saying to somebody that it's like being unplugged from the matrix. Before I was very innocent, didn't quite understand, didn't really let it bother me too much. Whereas now I am aware, I see everything all the time. And that has had a part to play in my own mental health in a negative way. Because I now realize that the world is made up of very, very horrible people at times, and very over and very in your face and very obvious. People don't hide it anymore, and that makes me sad and angry all at once. And I think the knowledge that we have now, knowledge goes around like wildfire. I know so much information by the time I've gotten out of bed, if I chose to go on my phone, than I would have had in a whole week back in the day. Do you know what I mean? So I think a lot of it is because of a shift in the way in which we assimilate and gather information and news. And, that in and of itself can be very damaging at times. So I don't think that, excuse me, it's necessarily worse now. I think that we know so much more now, which compounds the way we see and feel about our existence in this world.
Mm. I mean, I was listening to an interview on Radio 4. I think it's called it's a show that's called something like Are We Social? I can't remember the name of the
It's
name.
antisocial.
Antisocial, that's it.
Mm.
And they had on a couple of guests. I was driving on the motorway and I was trying to concentrate on that, but the program did grip me. But I didn't get the names of both of the guests who were speaking. I assumed they were both black women talking from different standpoints about the reparations argument and what that means for the UK and what it means for black people. And there's a lot more pressure around the conversations about the perpetuation of that disadvantage, rather than us thinking about what's happening right now. Actually, what's happening right now is a direct result of what happened back then.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very interesting, and I will find it on BBC Sounds because I want to listen to it again, because the arguments were, one of them was saying, well, there's a direct, clear line between what's happened ancestrally and why we're still struggling in terms of finances and access to finance and self-identity. And the other person was kind of saying, well, it's too difficult to map a direct line because the slave trade and the period of colonialization was so complicated. And so why don't we just think about things we can do like smaller grassroots funds or whatever. They're very different opinions and very different solutions. It's fascinating.
Mm.
But my view is that there is still a huge overhang in terms of family dysfunction, for example, in which goes a long way back. And I remember asking my mother, why is it? And I was one of those lone black brown faces at school, and with a lone parent and an absent father. And I remember feeling huge shame and huge embarrassment to the point where I'd make up stories, as you do,
Mm-hmm.
about what he was doing. He was traveling the world, always a storyteller. And I was making up these elaborate stories about him because everyone else, and all my white peers, and I'm going right back to being, 6 and 7, seem to have a family, a perfectly normal nuclear family with 2.4 kids and a dog. And I do have a dog now.
Yeah.
Tick.
Tick.
But there was so much of our family set up. And I remember asking my mother, why have so many of our friends, your friends, they just got one parent? And I I perceive some changes, but not that many.
Mm,
And I just wonder, I mean, and we know the impact of the family on an individual's mental health and how the family is set up. And then the issues around, the working mother and then the mother's mental health and stress, and then, different partners coming in. And then you've got the issues of step siblings or hidden siblings you didn't know you had. And so I just wonder that, are we still have we still got the shadow of that slavery and that dysfunctional way of building a family? Is it still there, and is it still harming us? Is that more harmful to us, or is the fact that we're being microaggression at work, is that more harmful? What do you think?
mm. Wow, what a question. Um, there's so much of what you said kind of like I align with, my mum was on her own, my dad wasn't around. I had a younger brother, only two, like I said, two of us at school that looked like me, three of us that looked like me. And what other people's, or the perception of other people's family life and dynamics were like versus the reality. And I think now, again, the systems to which we operate in this country specifically, I believe, and the modern society is the 2.4 kids. But who said that's right?
Yeah.
Where does that come from? Where is the blueprint that says that's the right way to live in your family? Back in the day, I would imagine, and I don't know because I was not there, but I would imagine that the family setup was very different to how it is now. Even the thought processes around marriage and monogamy, all of these Western ideas around, when the Crusaders went and civilized the countries and made them or introduced Christianity, where there are other religions or not actually necessarily organized religion, but spirituality that were there, which were seen as some kind of juju or whatever. The way in
Yeah.
which we have come to be where we are, and therefore the blueprint and the tick box exercise, which you alluded to earlier, who said that's the right way? Do you know what I mean? So therefore, what was it that we're missing? Was it a story that we were told, and therefore when we don't quite meet those expectations, then we're somehow failures? Is it that? Is it that actually the way in which our family dynamic was made up, that was the right way to be, and therefore we're just moving away from that? Who knows? And I don't have the answers to that. But what I do know is that if we keep on marking ourselves to a very Western way of existing, and some would argue that we live in the West, so therefore we should assimilate. And I've heard that question before. And again, I won't go into those arguments. People's opinions are their own. But I think if we've removed the ability to become creative and curious about what humanity actually looks like versus what it looks like now, and that can potentially become a problem. We often talk about in mental health about the colonization of therapy and the removal of ancestral ways of dealing with trauma and stress, which is moving your body, and the somatic movements of chanting to our ancestors and calling on those that came before us for support in our lives. That practice has been gone now. It's gone now to a certain extent in our everyday practice. So I think you used the word that I absolutely love earlier, which is nuance. And I don't think that the way in which we live right now is open to nuance. These conversations allow it because you can get into the actual bits and the bits of the conversation. But to think that this is the right way, that's the wrong way. To think that this is the right way, therefore, if you're not doing it, you're wrong, is very damaging to us because we're constantly then comparing ourselves to those people that seem to have it all. And then Suzy, when you get into their lives, you realize that they haven't got it all because we don't. And I think the messiness of
Yes.
humanity, the messiness of life is being lost, where we're trying to find, you mentioned earlier on about, that the solution to that ailment, the solution to that feeling, the solution to this, and the other, and if you pay for it, you might get it. And it removes our humanity. We're moving so far away from our human roots. I think that's the bit that overwhelmingly upsets me as a human being, because this can't be it. This cannot be the reason why we are placed on this planet, this beautiful, perfect as it was planet, to do what we've done to it. It makes me quite sad. So I don't think I've quite answered your question, but also, just before we move off from that question, I do also want to point in the fact that everything that happened before us has led us to where we are now. And I agree with you. It would be remiss of us to not take that into consideration, to understand the difficulties to where we are right now. And I remember somebody saying to me about reparations. Oh, reparations are ridiculous. Slavery took place hundreds of years ago. Like, why are we still talking about it? Blah, 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 blah. And she couldn't get it. It was a white woman, a really, really good friend of mine, actually. And we had this very heated conversation over maybe half bottle of gin, I'm not going to lie. But and it was a very interesting conversation, because I said to her, okay, let's just give you a scenario. She's got 2 kids. I said, imagine if your daughter punched your son in the face really, really hard, right? I mean, like, properly mash up his face, he's bruised, bleeding, all kind of stuff. And it happened 4 hours ago, and you weren't in, and you came in and you saw his face all mash up, and you were like, oh my God, what happened? And the other child said, yeah, I punched him in the face and I broke up his face and he's bleeding and all kind of stuff. And you went, oh, okay, well, it happened 4 hours ago. And she went, oh. I said, would you make the other child apologize? She's like, yeah, of course, like, it's done something wrong, but it was 4 hours ago. You weren't there. It was 4 hours ago. Why don't you just let it go? And she went, oh. I said, because it's not about the thing that happened. It's about, exactly, it's about recognizing that it happened, and that the person is sorry for what they did. And I think that we are always going to have problems in this country specifically because there has never been any acknowledgement really about the impact of that. And then if you put onto that the fact that we were paying as taxpayers, I'm a big woman, right? I've been paying taxes for a long time, but my own tax money and your own tax money went to pay slave owners compensation for their loss of human chattel. 2015.
Yeah, exactly.
What? And then you're wondering,
in our lifetime.
And you're wondering why people are vexed. Like, I'll just go over it. No, how am I supposed to go over that? So there is nuance, there is a lack of education. And I think to a certain extent, white people, when they hear about this, are gobsmacked. And I said to her, if I was you, I'd be pissed. I would be really upset because you've had your whole history, your whole history has been whitewashed. It has been ignored. And if I was you, I'd be really annoyed that you don't know this stuff. How am I telling you this and you didn't know this? So I'm able to have these really nuanced and fascinating conversations with people on a one-to-one. But again, I'm tired, right? Why am I doing it?
Yes, yeah. And also I think, imagine if the little boy got his face mashed up to a point where he was unable to work.
Yep.
He's blind.
Yep.
And that affected his ability to earn money.
And function in the world, yep.
And function in the world and his relationships. Remember, he would have grown up and taken to alcohol. You can see it's a lovely analogy, and you can actually take it you can stretch it, can't you?
Yeah.
And say, look at the damage that's inflicted. And then he has children, and then he becomes violent because he received violence. So then he punches his kids. And so you start to think, whoa, look at the impact of that.
Yeah, exactly. But it happened 4 hours ago.
And then I think this stuff is so important. And then it goes back into why it's important to understand and teach Black history in school.
That's right.
Because again, I've had this, this real anxiety about going to the schools and why is it all of the exclusion zones are full up of Black boys,
Yeah.
for example, or Black girls. And I think they cannot be the naughtiest kids in the school. There's 989 kids in the school. And all of them are naughty?
Yeah,
It doesn't make any sense. But when you try to understand it and you look at, behaviors, and then you go back, the first thing they tell you is about the family, is dysfunction. So, but then if you take it back to your example of the boy with his mash-up face, well, and you say that happened 2 or 3 generations ago for that little boy in the exclusion zone. And guess what? He's still struggling.
Yeah.
The grandson of the boy with the mash-up face is still traumatized.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Intergenerational trauma, right? And it's real. And I think that we know this now, don't we? Before we were not educated on this
Yeah,
stuff. And what I mean by that, it was very difficult for
yeah,
the everyday person, the lay person, to have a conversation around this stuff.
yeah. And
Whereas
make
now,
mistakes.
exactly. Whereas now we're kind of walked through that process, so we're educated to understand these things, which then creates that whole collective anger, right? And that collective vexedness and that sense of collective sense of injustice,
Yeah.
and that's where then the social justice movement comes in, and we mobilize, etc. But outside of these conversations, I worry, and again, every year I'm traipsed out in Black History Month to talk about this every month. And I have the same conversations with the same statistics with the same people who are
Hold
living.
yourself and just change the years.
Yeah, exactly
And
right. Yeah, I should
yeah,
do because it feels the same. And I say to them, and I'm quite honest in my talks now, because I'm kind of a certain age now. And I say, do you know what? I'm kind of bored of these conversations because there is no one in this room who is listening to this conversation who has the power to change anything. So it feels as if you're dining out on our collective trauma to tick a box to say you've done an activation in Black History Month, and that's not nice. And it's not, and it's also in our own spaces. Black people know this stuff. So when we're talking in echo chambers about this stuff within our own communities, we know this. So we know this. Where are the people that have the power to change things? Where are they? Because I don't see them. So I know in terms of the power to change, people will say, Danielle, don't be so defeatist. And I'm not. Again, there's nuance to these conversations. We can have conversations and mobilize and exact the beginnings of change, but we're not sitting in governments, we're not sitting in, and even if we do, not all skin folk is kinfolk, I'm just saying, so it's like, how do we move the dial enough so that in 20 years my kids aren't having the same conversation?
yes. I love that concept of this echo chamber because my dad, who I'm thankful he's still we actually reunited well into my 40s.
Wow.
I know. So there's a whole story there.
Rupture and healing, rupture and repair. It's beautiful.
Honestly, and it was actually after the passing of my mother, which I think is significant. So there's lots and lots of when you think you look at people's stories and you think if that was on a sitcom, you say, nah, that's not believable.
Wow.
Realistic. Um, but I think Oxo family is something that popped into my head. Maybe that's where we get it from, that the media that we consume in our Western society has painted a picture of how we need to live. But we know that that's actually not a realistic picture. And even if we think that the neighbours down the road, the white family down the road, have a perfect lifestyle with the dog,
Yeah, with the dog.
who's to know that that there's not things very unsavory happening behind closed doors, but the external appearance is one of stability and correctness, and they're doing things the right way.
Mm,
I think as a community and as diaspora, and I certainly see that families who've come here, maybe from African countries, don't hold themselves by that same yardstick of comparison as those who've grown up here.
yeah.
I think that's quite an advantage for them. Um, but just going back to being in the therapy room and what leads us there, do you think it's important for us, or why do you think it's important for us to have a therapist who looks like us? Why should the therapist potentially look like? Because in many Western therapies, you have a male therapist with a female client, or an older therapist with a young person or a woman. So, although there are in Western therapy some situations where you might pick to choose a particular sort of therapist, for example.
Mm.
But for us, having someone that looks like us, why is that important?
Mm. So, first of all, I will answer that it's important for us if it's important for us. It's important for the individual. So I want to kind of move away from as a collective, right? We are not a monolith. And I think it's
Yeah,
important for us to recognize that
yeah,
some people are absolutely happy with what they've got, and they really genuinely are. Some people need to do an awful lot more. Some people representation is very important to them. So again, there is nuance in those conversations. But I'll only use my own personal experience. So I've had therapy. I've been in therapy before. When lockdown took place, I became unwell with health anxiety diagnosis. And I had a white therapist, guy younger than me. He was training in CBT. He was a therapist, but he was training in this modality. And I could get to see him earlier because he was a student. And they asked me if I wanted to see him. I said, yeah, that's absolutely fine. Got on really well. He was awesome, showed me all these tools. It was brilliant. And I really enjoyed my therapeutic journey. And it was very, very successful, touch wood. And so the reason why I'm bringing that up is because actually I didn't have to touch on any of my trauma, any of my background, my culture, anything, nothing to do with it. It was a very, very clear and succinct challenge I went to therapy for, and I got the help and support that I needed. Now, when we're thinking about the stuff we've been talking about today, i.e., representation, trauma, our culture, background, our individual culture within our culture, all of those things, if I was to take into therapy the need to dissect and to understand my childhood trauma, my adverse childhood experiences, then for me, it would be really important that I have somebody who is Black Caribbean, preferably older than me, and a female. That's what I would be looking for very specific reasons, because I feel that that would be the best person to sit with me and to trawl and go through the things that I would like to go through at that point. Now, that's just an example as to the differences between understanding what you need,
Yes.
understanding what modalities of therapy are available to you, and understanding how to advocate for yourself. So representation is extremely important for at the right time, for the right reasons. I don't necessarily need to go into a therapy room and just have that therapist because they're Black. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. And for some people, it doesn't make any difference. So when I do get to that point, that's the type of therapist I want, because I've thought about it, I've understood it, I know what kind of modalities it is that I'm going to be needing, and that's what I will go for. So I hope that kind of gives people an understanding of why
Clear,
representation is necessary.
I think that a lot of people wouldn't have the same intellectual rigor or understanding of their own needs. So
Mm.
there'd be a lot of people who might want to get in touch with Black Minds Matter and say, I've got to see a Black person. It's the most obvious thing in the world. You say, I don't want to sit in front of them and
Mhm.
them terrorize me.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But then that's fine, because I
Yeah.
think even in your last point there, them terrorize me. That person might be coming in for a very specific reason around a very specific set of behavior. Now, removing my experience and my kind of opinion or my perspective on this, what's Black Minds Matter UK's USP is to match somebody based upon their presenting issues, what they're struggling with, how it's showing up in their life, and matching them with a therapist who specializes as close as in that protected characteristic or that challenge, and working with them to unpack it. But this is also why we have to go through things like mini assessments with our
Yeah.
service, because the mini assessment is a thing that actually highlights whether or not the person is therapy ready. Because it might be that this person is just vexed, and wants to speak to somebody because that person done it then terrorized me and me, finish, but actually they're not ready to go into therapy
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
They don't
Yes.
understand and recognize the work that is necessary to go into this, and they might not be ready. So it's not as easy as just going into therapy and discussing a business, right? It's a
Yeah.
process. And I
Yeah.
think with us, it's about explaining what that process is, so that when you do get to your top of the wait list, you're ready, you know what it is that is expected of you, and you're prepared for that.
Absolutely. I think that's really important, understanding and almost sort of coaching people through why a particular therapist would be, maybe the right person for them to speak to. Because if someone's had an issue at work, for example, and then they go into that thing, I hate all white people.
Mm,
Actually, it might be something more subtle going on underneath the surface that they haven't identified or addressed themselves.
that's right.
So that is a very interesting point. I think that's a great tool that you offer, that mini assessment. But just looking at that therapy process, I mean, what we all expect of therapy is what's known as person-centered therapy. And is that working for us?
Mm. Oh, what a juicy question. Wait, oh, I've got tingles for that question, Suzy. That got me tingles. Who knows, right? And again, I think it's, for example, one of our statistics is that 94% of our clients have reported on feeling better. And so hopefully it is working for them. And again, without going into kind of this existential removal away from our culture and our practice into this very individualized way of living, and therefore of gaining some support, that in and of itself could be a challenge. And what I mean by that, I'll give you an example. We've heard from students, for example, that are pressured into going into high profile jobs, for example, becoming a doctor or an engineer or solicitor, because their parents have told them, don't come home telling me you want to be a postman, you know what I mean? You've got to be a doctor, you've got to be this, because we've got to push hard, you've got to do all this kind of stuff. And then they come perhaps and go, the pressures of my parents, of me wanting to, become a postman or an artist, and they're telling me I need to be a doctor because otherwise I'll be a failure, is a very real challenge for a lot of our young people. But how do they then recognize that they've got, to a certain extent, their own autonomy, because that's what we're encouraging, but they also belong to a wider community and a wider culture of Black people? And that's hard, because what we're not saying is, well, come to us and we'll tell you how to go back to your parents and tell them, actually, this is my life, how dare you? Because within the Black community, try doing that. Do you know what I mean? That's not going to go down very well. So there is this disconnect between, actually, are we encouraging, full stop, are we encouraging this continuation of individualistic life, versus part of a community, part of a village, part of an expectation, and part of a wider community? It's a really difficult question and really difficult to answer. So person-centered, I think it depends upon what the expected outcomes for therapy are. Is it to be more gracious? And when I say gracious, I mean meeting our parents where they're at, right? My parents did not go into therapy. It wasn't an option for them. My grandparents didn't go into therapy. It wasn't an option for them. It wasn't something that they talked about. They just dug deep and got on with it, as traumatic as some people might find their lives. But you ask some of those people, they might turn around and say, do you know what? It was hard, right? But life is hard. They might turn around and say, do you know what? It was difficult at times, but yeah, life was difficult. Who told me it was going to be anything different? Whereas now I think that we are, and this is not just for our community, now I think that there is this expectation that life's supposed to be easy and whatever I want it to be. And therefore, if I work hard enough, or I buy that product, or I meditate 6 days a week, or I drink that tree root and I meditate and I do that, then everything's going to be great. Whereas what we're not telling people is that life is really hard, but you have the tools when honed to be able to get through them. And it's not overcome them or for them not to happen, but to get through them. Because bereavement is something we're all going to go through, all of us. Difficult times at work is something we are all going to go through, all of us. Falling out with your best friend is something we're probably going to go through.
Having a relationship.
Life is life in, right? And it's always life and lifed. So how do we have and I don't understand why people find this word difficult, the resilience, the ability to bounce back from these things. We don't want to be resilient all the time. Sometimes I just want peace. Right? But what is it that I'm looking for in order to find that peace? Maybe we're overstretching sometimes.
Absolutely. I was just thinking about, is talk therapy enough? You mentioned before about the sort of somatic modalities, and how can we make talk therapy more creative? How can we, as a people, we are very creative. I mean, we bring a lot of lyricism to life. That's where, that rap, and we find ways to express ourselves when we have been massively suppressed. So, and I think for some people, who may be neurodivergent or who may have social anxiety, the very act of speaking your pain, even if it's in a trained situation with a trained counsellor, can be just impossible. And then you have the issue of, vocabulary and language and misunderstanding and all the rest of it. So I'm just wondering, how can we look at things that are additional to talk therapy, and how does that work with what you offer?
I think that, first of all, those things exist. They exist. We already exist in those with those solutions. And I've been in situations where I've listened to an album. My children are trying to get me to listen to the Dave album at the moment.
Yes.
Apparently, it's very, 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 very emotional, and we'll talk about that and how emotional it is and how it made me cry, and it talked to my soul. And that, in and of itself, the crying is a release of pent up emotions and difficult. And we all have tear ducts. We're supposed to use them. We're quite petrified of crying, right? I love to cry, and it's important that we recognize that these are all therapeutic interventions without using the word therapeutic interventions. They're just the way in which we release energy, pent up grief, all of these things which
Even
are
the way we can release some of
absolutely.
that stuff that we're holding on to.
Yes, anxiety, shake it out, literally shaking it out and putting on your favorite bashment or your favorite like house music and losing it in your living room is a way of
Jungle,
releasing jungle music.
oh,
Yes,
darling.
yes, love that. Of releasing that energy. And it's a really beautiful way of doing it. But because it hasn't been given perhaps the same kind of thoughts around it or the same language about accessing it, it doesn't become seen as important. And maybe that's our challenge. Maybe it's recognizing that each of us do take part in what we would classify as things that have a therapeutic effect on us, but we don't use the language and therefore we don't put as much credence on it. So maybe it's about educating the people about that. And I went to an event last week, and it was the Black Restorative Network. Big shout out to that crew. It was amazing. And it was a very small, intimate group, but we had a circle at the end with an amazing practitioner. She's called, I'm going to find it, I'll put it on the notes, but I think she's called Unapologetically Black Yoga, I think it is. And it was phenomenal. She had us chanting and tapping our feet to a drum and really kind of getting to your core. And there were people in there crying their eyes out. I mean, it was a really moving exercise that had a release, that did what it was designed to do. And maybe it's getting back to our roots. And I mean that specifically, like specifically getting back to the drum and the music and the voice and the chanting and the singing and all of those things that are built in us. And they're inbuilt.
And they're ancestral anyway.
They are. And it was so powerful. And to answer your question, yes, we definitely need more of that. We need it as a way of supplementing perhaps talking therapy. And people believe that talking therapy, you go and you sort yourself out, you go out and you live your best life. No, it don't work like that. It is as a way of supporting you to do all of the things that you wish to do in your life and recognizing gaps that perhaps stop you from going to a chanting circle because you're embarrassed, and you're embarrassed because of X, Y, and Z, because when you were dancing, your mum told you at 6, stop doing that because whatever it is, and now you carry that with you. All of these things, all of this nuance. But yeah, to answer your question, talking therapy has its place, absolutely, but there are all the other ways of expressing yourself as a human that also have their place, and we should be doing more of that, connecting back to our ancestors.
Definitely. I think just looking at the systems, and some of the pressures that we face, we've talked about the sort of the arc of the requirement for mental health support and the past, but what's happening right now is how we are interfacing with the systems, like the health system and the education system and the social care system and the criminal justice system. And I just wonder what your thoughts are on having more representation, more black and brown people in those systems. Do you think, like employed in those systems, would that reduce their ability to hurt or traumatize us, do you think?
I do think so. But again, I said it earlier on, not all skin folk is kinfolk, right? I was at a talk the other day and I said about Black Lives Matter, and this black woman, she stood up and she said, I don't like that word,
What word?
Black Lives Matter. All lives matter is what she said, and it's a black woman. And I said, very diplomatically, I get it, all lives do matter, but if all lives mattered, then we wouldn't have the disparities in healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. I've said that to so many people before, black and white, and all the other melanated tones in between. And so it's not necessarily a black and white thing. It's a thought process, an individual thing. That woman thought it was important that she put her individual point across, and it wasn't A, relevant, and B, okay, fine. But people now believe that everything they say has a place, whereas I don't. That sounds awful to say, but we now say everything we want to say whenever we want to say it. It doesn't matter how people feel about it. That's just kind of the world we live in now. But it's the systems, I think, in terms of, we've got less than 1% of black people in clinical roles in therapy in the UK. That's really tough. But then if you think about the us at school and those difficulties now, they're aware of it in their education, that they're microaggressions, that they are being overlooked. They are aware of all of these things, and they quite rightly refuse to to keep their mouth shut, and they challenge the system. So we're not getting people in numbers because of those challenges that we are having this whole conversation around. And when we think about 3.4 million Black people in the UK of all shades and all makeups, we are a minority in this country, right? So we are always going to have lower numbers in everything. But I wish it was easier for everyone to choose modalities of work. And I don't necessarily mean therapy, but any kind of work, because they want it and they're good at it and they like it and they feel that they could be of service, rather than going into these positions because of representation. It shouldn't be,
It should be because you love that particular thing. And yeah, I mean, I just, just thinking about what you just said about that woman and all lives matter, and I think, I agree with that because we all belong to one race,
Amen. I
human
don't
race.
want to be religious, by the way, but yeah.
However, some races, those that happen to have a certain melanation, seem to be very vulnerable to dehumanizing actions of others.
Yeah.
And so, I love the idea of saying that every life matters, every little creature matters, and we all matter, and all the rest of it, and being very humanitarian and inclusive. But the issue I have with that is why do we have a disproportionate number of people of brown and black skin in the prisons, taking their own lives, seeking, dying in childbirth and pre and postpartum?
Yeah.
Da di da di da. So I think that there's a lovely sort of idealism about thinking that all lives matter, because of course they do.
Yeah.
Absolutely they do. But then they would only matter if all lives were treated with the same dignity and respect and humanity.
That's exactly it. And I love the way you've just said that we are only one race. There's only one race, and that's the human race. And I think that those people who, to your point, cause harm and are the biggest orchestrators of all situations across the whole of the world are so far removed from their humanity. It's unbelievable. And I think they're lost. And I think it's sad because as a Black woman, I am so fundamentally proud of who I am and where I come from and the color of my skin and the way I show up on all of it, even with all the trauma and difficulties that we live with. And if you ask the majority of Black people the same question, they all feel the same. We are so proud of who we are as people. And I don't know whether or not other people feel the same way. If they fundamentally think about what it is that's happened over the years, how can you be proud of that? What is there to be proud of? So I think it's almost like another layer above our current consciousness that we don't speak about, because ultimately we are all one people, and yet the systems of scarcity, abundance, thought process, individuality, greed, capitalism, money, power, all of these things are the things that have removed us away from our existence as human beings.
The division of the people, the humans have been split and divided really successfully.
Yeah.
So just before we wind up today, just tell me a little bit about your plans for future proofing and making Black Minds Matter more sustainable for the future.
Awesome. Thank you. I have to come back down now from from that place we were just talking about. Woo!
I've got one more. We're going to end on a high, believe me.
Excellent. Thank you. So yes, sustainability within Black Minds Matter UK has been my ultimate mission from day dot. And I think what kind of drove this for me was understanding that those people that supported Black Minds Matter UK in the very beginning were those people who had black squares, and the majority of them were not of our culture, and who were supporting the cause because everyone cared about it back then. The lack or the drop off of that has made that really clear to me that that's no longer the case. So what I'm doing is we've launched a campaign this October celebrating Black History Month with a really pioneering initiative. Now, the idea in itself is not pioneering. It's been used by our culture and communities for many, many years, which is the partner hand or the asusu or susu or ajo in other countries across Africa. So the idea is that we use a collective way of contributing to causes that we need support for. And so the idea is that everybody pays in a very minimal fee and a very affordable fee month on month to a collective pot that our community can draw down on whenever they need to by way of therapy, but also if they don't need to and they're blessed not to have to use mental health support, then they can pass that on to somebody else, either in their family or people that they know, or they can signpost. So what we're looking for, Suzy, is that we collect 100,000 people giving us £1 a month. That's all. So it's not a lot. I mentioned 3.4 million Black people in the UK. I'm not asking for all of them because I know that's going to be a tough ask. But if I can ask 100,000 people to donate £1 per month, that can create a real sense of sustainability across the UK for our services and get us out of our current situation where we've got 700 people on a wait list waiting for a service that is oversubscribed. Because the more we talk about this, the more people want to do their own healing and we want to be able to support them. So that's the idea behind the Pardon campaign. I'm really excited. It's a slow burner, but I think people will, come around to the idea that actually they can all afford £1 and they can give it to me and I can then go and help our community.
Absolutely. And would you open to sort of lump sum donations if someone would say, okay, I can't do it every month, but here's like 50 quid, here's 20
Yeah.
quid. That bit,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what we're asking is, so people can give £1 a month, or they can give a whole year at a time. So it's like £12 it is for the year if you want to pay for the annually. People can give one-off donations. So, if people have got 50 quid, we're more than happy to
Bring it
give
on.
that. Bring it on, please. Every little counts. And I think the whole idea behind the Partner campaign is that it's not asking for massive amounts of money from a small amount of people. It's
It's what
asking
you
for
kind
a
of
tiny
you
amount
probably
of
won't
people.
miss. That's less.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's less. No, there was a time when that's a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. No, it's not even that
No,
anymore.
it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not even a bottle of water. I mean, some bottle of waters are £1.55 for a little bottle of water. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
whatever people can give, we are extremely grateful. But I think for me, the most important part of this campaign is that, and it's not to say that we're not accepting help from our allies, but I believe that as going back to our ancestral roots and go back to our sense of community and growth, this is a real opportunity for us to pull together and to be there for our community when they need it, which is why it's by, for, and with our community.
Yes, and I love it, and I love that concept of partner because I remember hearing it years ago and thinking, what does that mean
Yeah.
in the context of the Jamaican grouping? And they'd use a partner for Christmas.
That's right.
So people that found Christmas very overwhelming, which it still is massively, but in those days it would just be find the food.
That's right.
Family, it wasn't even like buying expensive presents, just like make sure you have your gortan, your turkey,
Mhm.
and you
Yes, ma'am.
feed your family at Christmas. So you put your money into your partner, and by the end of the year,
Draw.
draw out your money, and you could feed your family. So
That's
I
right.
love the way you've kind of revitalized that word, and
Thank you.
it's amazing. So finally, tell me what you think about Black Joy.
Oh, I love Black Joy. And we've talked about Black Joy today. We've talked about, and I think you probably could see how excited I was when we were discussing, that circle that I was part of last week. It was such a beautiful, beautiful experience. And Black Joy for me is joy that comes from an understanding of who we are as people, but also of where we're going as people. Even with all of the difficulties, we can still find those really special moments in our lives collectively and individually that bring us together as people. So, like Carnival, Black Joy and Abundance, right? And Trini Carnival, Tobago, and all of these moments that bring us together to recognize or remember who we are as people is for me, Black Joy.
I love that. I love that. For me, Black Joy, if I may share, it's about nyamming food around the table with all your best people, your aunties, uncles, grandmas, grannies, dads, stepdads, half sisters, just all of us getting together in whatever form works because that is family,
That
really.
is family.
And it's also that, that collective, people bring a little coleslaw and
A potato salad.
some fritters, and we just all share the food, and just in that moment, that to me is joy. That is joy, that sharing of food and seeing all the different reflections of you. as well. So that also gives me joy, and having like the elders talking to the young ones. So that works for me because I'm quite a big foodie and I'm a very big family person. So that's
Love that.
yes, yeah, I love that. With your music playing, obviously.
That's right. I was about to say you got both best of both worlds right there, yeah. Like food and the drink and
Yeah,
the music,
the
yeah,
music.
yeah, and the collective and the family. And
Yeah.
that picture you just painted is so nostalgic for me. It was really lovely. So yeah,
Oh,
thank you.
yeah. Danielle Bridge, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. I really, really appreciate all your words, and I think you've certainly got us all thinking. And very good luck with the partner scheme, and I'll share all the details. So please do click through, make your donations, get in touch, find out more about what Black Minds Matter are doing and support them because it's a fantastic charity. And thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. That was such a wholesome conversation. I really appreciate it. It's been lovely. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.